This is the BBC.
Hello, Russell Kane here. Before you suck this BBC loveliness into your ear canals, I'd like to tell you about another podcast, Evil Genius. It's me, plus a panel of funny clever clogs, working out whether famous folk from history were more evil than they were genius. Take Einstein, for example. Very clever physicist, but split the atom, killed everyone. Subscribe to Evil Genius wherever you get your podcasts and hear more. That was supposed to have an echo on it.
Oh, hello there. Welcome to Comedy of the Week with me, Sindhu V. When I was 15, I moved schools. I hated the new school, but my fear of my mother was far, far greater. So, rather than get expelled, which I very much wanted to, I just had to lump it. Hate and fear, the bedrocks of a good education. Anyway, things changed drastically for me after a few weeks because of a girl in my class. I didn't meet her, rather she met me. She walked right up to me and said something super interesting, part flippant, part knowing, and very mesmeric about the school uniform. That's right, a topic I thought I knew everything about. She made it new and intriguing. The school uniform, people. Long story short, we became best friends. Her comments on everyday things made me wonder more, argue more, decide more, and laugh a lot more than I thought I could. Just to be clear, I supplied a lot of the laughs, but she made it possible for me to think of serious, angst-ridden teenage stuff as having a funny bone. Now, I'm bringing all this up because this week's comedy pick, Sara Pascoe, the Modern Monkey, is a lot like hanging out with my friend all over again. It's a wondrous romp with a good pal through topics you think you know a lot about, except you don't. We're going to listen to episode 1 of the new series, and it's all about murder. Yoo-hoo. But first, we're going to find out a little bit more about the show itself from Sarah, who is sitting right here in front of me in the studio. Hey, Sarah.
Hello. I really want to meet your friend.
She's also the first person that ever told me that I was not ugly.
Oh,
which is a wonderful thing to hear.
It is a wonderful thing to hear, yes. And you think, you tricking me?
I did.
Yes, yeah.
Why are you, why are you saying that?
What a wonderful woman.
Such a great friend.
Yes, good friend.
Anyway, hello.
Hello.
And thanks for coming. So, as I mentioned, this episode is all about murder.
Yes.
Can I ask, why did you pick a topic like murder?
Well, when I was researching the series, because I knew I wanted to kind of deal with things from an evolutionary perspective, but I found the murder stuff the most thrilling to research. So I, like lots of people, the advent of podcasts made me remember how much as a teenager I loved serial killers. And there are so many podcasts, and they're brilliant podcasts, and there's fascinating ones and terrifying ones and funny ones. And so I found researching murder kind of the most delicious. And especially then the idea that there is no such thing as a monster in humanity. There are extremes of human behaviour, and I think that's why so often we're fascinated by certain actions of other human beings, because you have to kind of get into their psychology a little bit, or absence of empathy. So yeah, I started from a point of going, how can one person live their life in this way and another person is such an aberration? And then it ended up being, obviously, because it's a comedy show, and it was really good. My producer very early on was like, okay, less about how much you fancy Ted Bundy, and now let's try and lighten it up a little bit. So that was why. And then in terms of putting it out first of all, that there'd been this discussion of, it's quite a harsh topic, we should bury it episode 3, which is what they always say. And then actually when it all got edited together, it wasn't too dark. And also people are fascinated with that aspect of human behaviour.
Well, there you go. So we're going to listen to the show now. Ladies and gentlemen, Sara Pascoe, the Modern Monkey.
Hey, we're the monkeys, and people say we monkey around, but we're too busy singing to put anybody down.
Welcome to Modern Monkey. I'm Sara Pascoe, and throughout this series, I'll be examining anthropological explanations for modern behaviours. Human beings evolved like any other animal, but we've forgotten that. We understand ourselves as superior to the other animals because we have cars and monocles. But there is animal in us still. like how we are classified as a hairless ape. Homo sapiens lost their body hair, say the history books, yet I have a chin that can grow hair in 3 colours. This series is an attempt to stop ignoring the chin hairs. Instead, we are going to pluck them out and examine them closely. Why does it persist? We all have traits and urges that might appear very antisocial to us nowadays, but they were of good use to our ancient ancestors. Like, for example, I don't know, like farting. I promised myself I'd come up with a better example than farting after the record and add it in, but I haven't. Today, we're going to be thinking about a trait far more antisocial than farting, a behaviour even more frowned upon at dinner parties: murder. It's a dark topic, but we have to acknowledge that killing people is something that some people do. I want to think about why. Why would such a behaviour be an evolutionary benefit? And also, why not? Like, most of us spend most of our time never killing anyone. Like, why is that? We're recording today in the RAF Museum, a respectful collection of machines and artillery that allows humans to execute each other from a distance. War legitimises murder, positively encourages it. If you were to grab some scrap from your garage and invent a spiky bomb to explode Gary at work, you'll be arrested and sent to an asylum. If you say the bomb is for Britain's enemies, any nation with oil, or the French, you'll get a medal. My mum always said that if she was going to kill somebody, nobody has ever asked her. By the way, she's just staring out of a window wistfully, and then she just turns around like, if I was going to kill somebody, no one's asked her. If I was going to kill somebody, I'd do it with insulin, because it kills you if you're not a type 1 diabetic, and it occurs naturally in the body, so they don't test for it in autopsies. Which begs so many questions. Starting with, are you threatening me? This is a great impression of my mum. She sounds exactly like me. My mum has access to insulin because my youngest sister is a type 1 diabetic, and also my mum's favourite, which doesn't make sense. She's broken. Why get attached? When I think about how I would kill someone, I'm reminded of that Roald Dahl short story, Lamb to the Slaughter. It's about a wife who finds out that her husband is cheating on her, and then so she whacks him with a frozen leg of lamb, and then she puts the lamb into the oven and cooks it, and when the police come around to investigate the murder, she feeds it to them for their dinner. Yeah, getting rid of the murder weapon is so clever, but I'm a vegan, and so I was thinking that if I ever find out anybody's cheating on me, I'll have to kind of like pelt him with lentils for ages, and then I'll have to put all of the lentils into a big pot and kind of cook them up with herbs and spices, and then when the police come round, I'll be like, oh, would you like some dal? Rolled dal. Yes, and then the police, maybe the chief, he'll think, oh, why did she say Roald Dahl in that really creepy way? Maybe it's a clue. And then he'd go to the library and he'd read all of Roald Dahl's back catalogue, and he'd read that story, Lamb to the Slaughter, and go, oh, she pelted him to death with lentils. That's why he was covered in all those little small round circles. And then I'd go to prison and I'd deserve it. Because I think one of the worst things you can do to someone is kill them. It's just my opinion. Just my opinion. I think it's out of order. Bear this in mind before you add insulin to your Ocado delivery. Being murdered is my biggest fear. Every single night I can't sleep because I'm so terrified that a stranger is going to break into the house and kill me. And this is an irrational fear. People say that you're much more likely to be murdered by somebody that you know. And they're probably right. I am annoying. This is true. I sleep with a hammer in my bed, just so I can protect myself if anyone does kind of break in, and that's why you don't see the milk tray man on TV anymore. I obsess about the people who kill. I'm obsessed with murderers because it's an aspect of human nature that horrifies me. And I know I'm making jokes about it and being flippant, but sometimes flippancy diminishes the fear. Like the comments I made about my sister just a moment ago, obviously I don't mean that. So she's not the favourite. I'm famous. With all of our wars and genocides and Harold Shipmans, I think of human beings as being the worst. I think we must be the most vicious species on the planet. But scientists compiled a list of the most murderous mammals, and human beings aren't even in the top 30. Chinchillas kill each other more than we do. So do Californian ground squirrels. And the mammal most likely to kill their own is the meerkat. Yeah, nearly 1 in 5 meerkat deaths are murder. Their police force must be very overstretched. What on earth are they arguing about? Like, insurance rates? Calm down, meerkats. Like, surely you can solve your problems by talking about them or ganging up together to eviscerate the annoying opera singer man. If any of us was to ask a scientist, like, oh, who invented murder? They will tell you that interspecies killing is a behaviour shaped by evolution. It is. That's what's weird. We have the genes to occasionally kill each other because that behaviour was of benefit to some of our ancient ancestors. Some animals never kill each other, like porcupines, even though their skin is literally covered in weapons. The only person I've ever had murderous thoughts about is my other sister. Now, I'm not going to tell you her name to protect Cheryl's identity. We're very close in age. I'm 18 months older than her, and for as long as I can remember, she has been there taunting me. She would do things like this in the house. If my mum was in another room, she would slap herself round the face. Yes, you were correct to gasp. Slap herself round the face, and then shout, "Mum!" This is such a good impression of my sister. She sounds exactly like me. And then it looked like I had hit her. She had this like red mark on her face. And that is something, by the way, I would never do. That is not my MO. I used to give tiny little pinches on the bottom of the arm that are really painful and don't leave a mark. Perfect for long car journeys. But so the angriest I've ever been in my life, and it still scares me to remember it, I was 15 years old. I was running a bath because I was going out on a Saturday to meet my friend at the cinema. And just as the bath was nearly kind of halfway full, Cheryl took off all her clothes and she jumped into the bath. And I was like, "Get out of the bath, Cheryl!" And she was like, "Are we in it?" Which is the kind of thing, I know, it's the kind of thing she would have done because she'd done it before, because we always had to share bath water, as is common in lots of dirty families. And then, so eventually she got out of the bath, and I was so worried I was going to be late. This is before mobile phones. People left if you weren't there on time. So I jumped in, and as I did, Cheryl sauntered past the bathroom wearing the outfit that I'd laid out on the bed to wear, and I had to chase her down the street in a bath towel, and then she was wiggling her bum and going, "You snooze, you lose," which is like, no, it was a really kind of harsh phrase in the 90s. And I know, and I couldn't catch up with her because she was wearing my shoes. I know, and if I had been holding a gun or a knife or a handful of lentils, I would have used it. It scares me to think about it now. Also, she got better GCSEs than me. I've got a whole episode about jealousy, and I talk a lot more about Cheryl and how jealous she must be of me. But it's interesting, why would somebody want to kill their sibling? The phrase they use is sibling rivalry. This describes the competitiveness between brothers and sisters, and it exists not just because some of us are badly brought up and have terrible personalities. There is also an evolutionary explanation. So let us picture our species 100,000 years ago. Nomadic hunter-gatherer tribes living in sub-Saharan Africa. Pair-bonded parents, they would have a set amount of resources. Whatever food or affection they have must be shared between their children. This means that feeding kids is a zero-sum game. Any food going to Cheryl is food taken away from Sarah. And give me back my biscuits, Cheryl. Take Christina's. She shouldn't even be eating them. She's got diabetes. Modern humans are much less likely to starve to death. Brothers and sisters needn't be competing with each other for success in the modern world, but we still feel the instinct for it. We still feel jealous and resentful. Anyone with children, it says, Anyway, no. what I've done is I've written brothers and sisters needn't be competing with each other for success, and then there's an asterisk, and I've written insert joke about the Miliband's. But we still feel the instinct of it. We still feel jealous and resentful. Anyone with children will know that they fight over toys and sweets and who got off with whose boyfriend. Yes, it was Cheryl. 10,000 years is not a long time in evolution. Our biology has not forgotten our harsh, starved forager lifestyle. Here's what's so interesting about considering evolutionary explanations for modern actions. Our environment, our society, is civilised and organised. Our minds are conscious and aware. We absolutely understand we mustn't kill each other. We are taught, thou shalt not kill, and we obey. No matter how annoying our sisters, we allow them to survive. And yet, we contain the echoes of animal, the shadow of ancient urges. Occasionally, in your life, each of you will have felt a murderous impulse. I imagine you will have suppressed it, taken a few deep breaths. If you're Steve from Chelmsford, you may well have tweeted me about it during a 2014 episode of Have I Got News for You that was repeated this year. David Cameron isn't Prime Minister, you stupid cow. I'm going to smash your face in with your fat legs. Thanks for your feedback, Steve. If there is an evolutionary explanation for a behaviour, why don't we all do it, like farting? For help with understanding this, it does help to consider the other apes. So our closest ape relative is the chimpanzee. Their murder rate is 4.5%. 4.5% of all chimpanzee deaths are murder. With our actual relatives, the murder rate is only Uncle Alan, and he still claims it was an accident. When we talk about apes being closely related, it means that in evolutionary terms, we share a lot of our genes, and we only relatively recently diverged. Our last common ancestor with chimps was between 5 and 7 million years ago. He was called Hairy Sue. Well, he wasn't. I'm being silly. To try and lighten up the facty bits. We're also very closely related to the bonobo. Now, this species diverged from the common chimp about 1 million years ago, but it demonstrates very different behaviours. Bonobos are very peaceful, with a homicide rate of less than 1%. They are famous for being super sexy. Bonobos avoid conflict by getting off with each other, right? They get off with each other all the time. The females display their receptiveness 24/7, constantly. They use sex to calm down any aggression in males, and they are unique in nature because they kiss on the mouth with tongues like we do. And they also practice incest like we don't. We don't. Let's remind ourselves why apes kill each other. As an ape, you might kill another ape to get their food or in order to mate with their partner. You might fight to the death in order to protect your kids. This makes sense. These life or death situations are why aggression exists in our DNA in the first place. But it still feels wrong to assess human beings like other animals. We're far more sophisticated a creature. We use calculators and queuing systems. We have reason. I don't enjoy being confronted with the animal side of human nature. I am so civilised. I am not a naughty chimp. You don't see me grinning and flashing my hairy bum. Well, I'm sorry. You shouldn't have been part of that WhatsApp group. It's for ex-boyfriends only. It's actually very rare for adult mammals to kill each other. Wolves, coyotes, hyenas, they do it as well as humans and the other great apes. And for the same reasons, fighting over mates and territory. Statistically, the day someone is most likely to be murdered is their birthday. No, not the bump's gone horrifically wrong. The actual day of our birth is the day that we're most vulnerable. So congratulations, everyone, for making it this far. If you've ever had hamsters or watched a David Attenborough programme, you'll know that some animals eat their own young. Like when it's your best friend, Hammy, you're watching Chow Down on Fluffy and Snowy, it does make you much warier of your own mother. Is that hunger in her eyes, or is she still sad about Princess Diana? mental infanticide contradicts everything we've understood about evolution so far. If all creatures are geared towards replicating their own genes, why would they eat those genes for breakfast? The answer is that if an animal is stressed or malnourished, she may judge it a bad time to be reproducing. With humans, severe stress can make a new mother consciously or subconsciously unwilling to put effort into her child. You're about to hear me being guided round the Foundling Museum by Caro Howell. She's standing in front of a very stunning painting by Joseph Highmore depicting the desperation of a woman contemplating infanticide. You can hear me going, yeah, like I knew anything she was talking about or anything about Western art.
This is this respectable Georgian middle-class woman strangling her baby, and there is the angel pointing her back to the Foundling Hospital. And it's too much. I mean, this is an unfinished oil. And he ends up doing, in a sense, putting it in a safe place by giving you biblical metaphor and Hagar and Ishmael and a kind of biblical mother who is forced to abandon her child to leave it to start. You know, we cannot think of a single other representation in Western art. You get Medea's, but that's classical mythology. That's not reality. But of course, the interesting thing is the baby is still alive. It's got a little splash for its tongue and it's kicking. She has a choice. Does she take it to the hospital? But of course, the key to all of this is she only has a choice if people support the hospital.
To us, as emotional and rational beings, a newborn being hurt or neglected is the most atrocious thing imaginable. But in evolutionary terms, a mother is better off waiting until she's in a position to successfully raise a child rather than to waste time and resources on one that is unlikely to survive. Ad break. I'd like to take a moment here to mention my range of Mother's Day cards. I've got, thanks for not leaving me in a wheelie bin. At least you're not a meerkat. And don't eat me, I'm 36. To get back to this question, why do some people kill and others don't? How is Cheryl still alive and well and walking around in my trousers? Actually, we should consider gender here because it's a huge factor. It's very difficult for women to break into murder because it's such a male-dominated industry. 90% of murders and 98% of mass murders are committed by men. When a woman does manage to make it, she is often referred to as a female murderer, or even worse, a murderess. This annoys female murderesses and makes them want to work even harder at killing people and prove themselves. Women don't like being told why their biology makes them worse at murdering, but I'm going to do it anyway. Evolutionary theorists, they tell us that a male is more likely to benefit from aggressive behaviours. Fighting can get male status and respect and more mating. This means that for a male human, aggression equals more likely to have their genes replicated equals more and more aggression in Homo sapien males. It suggested that aggressive behaviours from females would actually leave their offspring more vulnerable, less likely to survive. The example is used that a woman who goes around hitting people is much more likely to be punched herself. She should get a hammer. If violence makes a female human a worse mother, then of course less of her aggressive genes are going to be replicated. Instead, the successful females are the nurturing ones. They look after their bundles of genes and concentrate on keeping them alive rather than karate chopping other people. Evolutionary theory instructs us that for millennia, men have been rewarded for fighting and women for avoiding it. The problem, though, with biological imperative, and especially with discussing evolution in such broad strokes, is that we always end up back with a version of early humans that have women kind of sitting around a little pink fire cooking flowers, and while muscly men are hunting bears from cliff to cliff and jumping as high as the sky and being amazing. But something that cannot be flagged enough is that whatever gender of body you possess, you are on a spectrum. So we can say sweeping things like, oh, men are taller than women or women are fatter than men, but that's not true of individuals. Also, lots of people are gay, but when talking about our evolution, it's all male and female pair bonding and breeding. It excludes the reality that many people are not attracted to people of the opposite sex. Evolution, I really like it, but it's very heteronormative. It is, because it takes a male body and a female body to make a new human that may or may not be a murderer. We must also be careful when exploring animal explanations for human behaviours that we aren't giving support to banal and unhelpful statements about boys and girls. Anytime someone makes a sweeping statement about a gender, they are wrong. And I say that as a bossy, selfish, hairy woman who is excellent at map reading. Lots of females are unnurturing, aren't they, Mum? And most men are diplomatic, empathetic communicators who love a gossip and fear violence as much as I do. Men, please don't feel you have to kill to keep up with your friends. If murder is an adaptive strategy favouring the perpetrator's reproductive success, why don't we all do it? Why do barely any of us do it? The current murder rate for human beings is only 7.6 out of every 100,000 deaths, or 0.01%. That's low. This is very low, lower even than bonobos. In your face, you French-kissing, your mum lunatics. One answer is that aggressive behaviours beget aggressive behaviours. If you hit someone, you are more likely to be hit. Violence is antagonistic, and it can make the perpetrator vulnerable. The vast majority of us, then, our adaptive reproductive strategy is to avoid violence, to diffuse it, to fear it. But what decides who is who? What mechanism makes one person Fred West and another person Mahatma Gandhi? It's helpful if we think of our inherited biological imperative as our genes as a toolbox. You're born with a whole heap of tools that were useful to your ancestors hundreds of thousands of years ago, many of which you will never use. Every human being has the capacity for murderous rage, as I mentioned earlier. I'm pretty sure everyone at some time has felt it, but we have chosen to leave that tool, our hammer, under the bed. There are many fascinating factors to this. In very, very simplistic terms, all of us have a lump of animal brain and then a hat of prefrontal cortex sitting on top, attempting to keep that animal under control. Imagine someone's knocked over your pint, and I'm aware this is Radio 4, and that pint is of Malbec. But nevertheless, you're furious and you're covered in booze. How you react will be mediated by your hippocampus, your amygdala, and your cingulate gyrus. These areas of your brain that have learned from previous experiences, that build the memory of traumatic events and how to avoid them. If your prefrontal cortex is underdeveloped, you'll be much more likely to thump the pint spiller. People are more likely to be violent if their mother drank and smoked while she was pregnant. Stress is the other in utero factor. They've done these experiments on rats, and what they did is they stressed the mother out, so she was releasing a lot of cortisol, and then what they found out is that when her pups were born, they were much more aggressive. The theory goes that certain genes are switched on by environment, and so a stressed mother is a reaction to a tough environment, and so to be ready for a tough environment, the baby rats became more aggressive. Now, I don't like rat experiments, and I don't like any animal experiments. I don't think they're easily transferable to human beings. Also, I don't think I understand the people who want to do them. Like, oh, Robert, what do you do? I stress out pregnant rats. Oh, that's nice. How do you do that? I just whisper in her ear. I don't think you can cope. The place is so messy. The other rat experiment, though, another one that they did on this same topic, they noticed that rat pups who weren't licked by their mother, so when baby rats are born, the mother licks them a lot. If the mother wasn't able to do that, those rats grew up to be much more aggressive. It makes you think, doesn't it? You almost never see human mothers licking their babies. There's this amazing study in the 1970s. A man called David Olds, he set up a study where he randomly allocated 400 mothers to receive home visits from nurses during pregnancy and during the first 2 years of their child's life. They were visited every 2 weeks and given training, support and advice. They were taught about nutrition and given prenatal and postnatal care. The study resulted in a 15% decrease in neglect and child abuse compared to a control group, and 15 years later, the children of mothers who had been supported had half the arrest rate of children from mothers who had received none. It's huge. This is such an amazing and hopeful thing. While human beings have a beast inside us, it is tamed by sociability. We all do better if we work together. Oh, that's all well and good with your liberal propaganda, Pascoe, but how are we going to pay for it? Well, as 90% of murderers are male, how about we put a little tax on male income? It's just an idea. Just a few pounds every week that can be used to support low-income families, that can be used to educate and nourish young people with antisocial tendencies. I've just solved murder and the wage gap. You're welcome. I am actually joking about man tax. I'm only really saying it to annoy Steve from Chelmsford. This David Old study saved around $2.4 for every dollar spent. Antisocial behaviour costs us so much more than measures to prevent it. Spending in the short term saves on health costs, courts and prisons and mental health services in the long term. All we need is a committed cross-party initiative and someone to set up a similar system with meerkats. But here's the positive. So I think this is positive. We, as a species, are detribalising. Over the last 400 years, human beings have been killing each other less and less. We are increasingly structuring our societies in an empathetic way. We are learning to be kind to each other. Our civilised societies depend on it. Our species has learned that peaceful behaviour is a survival technique. When we understand that the brain is a plastic machine growing in response to experiences, we realise that so many antisocial behaviours can be avoided by nurturing children. It's worth remembering that even while some human beings continue to behave atrociously to others, as a species, we are improving. We are domesticating. Let's congratulate ourselves with a nice episode of Taggart.
There's been a murder.
We're too busy singing to put anybody down.
That was Sara Pascoe, The Modern Monkey, Episode 1, Murder. Oh, and I loved it. Who knew bonobos are such sexy beasts? Yeesh. It was a BBC Studios production, and the producer was Alexandra Smith. And you can find the rest of the series on the BBC website or on the BBC iPlayer radio app. But before you rush off to listen to all that, Sarah is still with me. Hello again.
Hello.
So first of all, what does your sister Cheryl think of the show?
Cheryl has only heard about it via one of her students. My sister's a teacher. She's a brilliant, brilliant teacher, and I'm very, very proud of her. And I also have to be very careful what I say about her. I've got two sisters, so sometimes if I'm trying to disguise it, I say a sister, so they can both say it's the other one. But I got a text message the day after it went out on the radio going, "Thanks for telling people are we in the bath?" And I didn't even remember what I'd said. And then I had to think, what's that? Oh, yeah, my radio show. I was like, oh, yeah, I did say that. But I'm very lucky with my family. If I mention something about them, I think in this episode I mentioned my sister's diabetes, my other sister's diabetes as well, and it's quite a harsh joke. I do kind of check with them, hey, just so you know I'm saying this thing. But they are very good of like, my mum and dad especially, both kind of go, I don't remember it, I don't agree with it, but that's your version of the truth. And so, which is actually very generous of them.
It is very, very generous of them. Yeah. Well done them.
Yes, well done them.
Big shout out to Mr. and Mrs. Pascoe for doing that.
They're not married anymore.
Oh, oops.
No, that's okay, that's okay. Shout out to my stepmom, Kirsten.
So it's actually very refreshing to hear you say on the show that humans are doing better.
Yes.
At least in terms of murder.
Yes.
Than ever before. Has your research then made you more positive about the human race?
I think I started from a position of being quite positive anyway. I think that evolution is a process of survival. There's a theory that we're a self-domesticating species,
right,
that we select people who are really kind and generous to mate with. Although you have the odd aberration, for instance, actually with serial killers, they're the kind of woman who will marry Charles Manson or write letters to Ted Bundy. But that's a very small percentage of people. the rest of us, we like kind people who don't scare us, people who are like kneel down and pat dogs and are nurturing, and I really love that theory that very obviously evolution is incredibly slow. But what's happened is we used to be in tribes of about 150. Now we're in a tribe of 9 billion, however many people it is left in the world. And we're just learning to be better as a huge group.
Yeah.
Because it's not like horrible things don't happen, but I feel like we have to look at progress in a really positive way.
I think that a lot of what is good about the human race gets buried in the bad news, which, of course, is more interesting in a way.
Yeah.
The bad news is more interesting.
There's an evolutionary theory that because we learn from negative things, that our brain always remembers it more, and also we do seek it out. And it's true, like in terms of like in a very capitalist sense, newspapers have to sell negativity because people buy more papers, and we focus on those things. But again, it's because if you went in terms of like hunter-gatherer society, if you go into a cave and you get rocks dropped on you from the roof, you have to remember you learn from that so you don't go in that cave again. If there's a lion hiding around the corner, you have to learn from that. And so we do focus on bad things.
Yeah.
Because there's a benefit to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you're a vegan.
Yes.
And you brought it up in the show. And in the interest of total transparency, I'm a vegetarian.
Yes.
But I guess you could say religious. I'm a Hindu.
Yes.
We just never ate meat.
Yes.
End of.
Yeah.
How do you feel about this current trend of veganism and that whole, there's a vegan January thing?
Yes, yeah.
What do you think about all that?
Well, I actually think, so for a really long time, people who were vegan, I guess they were people who had either, usually it's because they were more aware of dairy and egg farming, for instance. So more aware, they've read some articles or they've seen a film or a documentary. Something has happened that makes them empathise in a way to go, oh my gosh, that's much crueler than I thought it was going to be. It's much crueler than it has to be. And they make this decision. But for a long time, I think then there was a binary because their frustration that other people didn't know that what was happening actually was alienating people who went, everyone drinks milk. Cows get milked. No one's getting hurt. They're not even, do you see what I mean? And I think everyone has a certain amount of information, depending on how much time they have to shop and cook and think about things. I think any discussion which is about, try this, you might feel better. Because that, for me, I didn't become a vegan forever. I did it as an experiment, so I've always been vegetarian. And again, I thought, I don't want animals to have bolts through their brains on my behalf. I'm not going to eat meat. But I thought, well, what's wrong with milking a cow? And so one of the things for me was that I just felt instantly so much better when I didn't have dairy, even though, like, I miss it, like people do. You do kind of, you look at someone having a cheese board going, wow. That is one of life's, like, most incredible pleasures. But I felt so much better in myself, having always felt like a low-energy vegetarian. And I think that's what happens for lots of people. And that's why I think whatever journey people go through in terms of making themselves feel better is a positive journey.
So I guess the thing is, let it be a fad because at least people are talking about it.
Yeah, and I don't think it is a fad. I think people are a lot of people with a certain amount of income, because it does involve disposable income.
Sure.
They can grab things now, and it's so much easier to be a vegan than it was. I think in the 70s and 80s, the whole cliche of like a very pale, paper-thin, skeletal person is true, because you couldn't eat anything. The whole lentil cliche is because you had to make your own dal, whereas now I can just eat vegan cakes. Like I could literally, in London, Sharon Horgan once described it as being a dessert vegan. You can be a dessert vegan, and it's delicious.
And it's yummy. Yeah. No. I mean, I love dessert, but I'll have vegan dessert. I don't mind. Okay, I want to move on to Steve from Chelmsford.
Oh, yeah. Old Steve.
Yeah, good old Steve. Now, I don't know if that was a direct quote of his. I don't know if he really exists. I assume he did. But most people in the public eye get quite a lot of flack online.
Yes.
How do you let it wash over you?
Well, there's lots of different things. So Steve is kind of an amalgamation of and actually I'm naughty even making him from Chelmsford. I'm from Essex. And again, it's a little bit kind of cultural stereotyping. You imagine Steve, you can picture him, can't you? So which is a bit unfair of me. So I think there's a big difference between criticism and trolling. Sometimes we use the word trolling, when actually what we mean is someone didn't like my thing. Yeah. Someone thought that wasn't good enough. Someone thought that wasn't very well researched. Someone thought that wasn't very funny. So I think criticism and subjectivity, it's oh God, it's so hurtful. But it's not meant with hatred.
No.
Actually, I think when your job is a mouthpiece, sometimes it's very hard to be an ear because you want to be able to put everything out and not, shut up, everyone. I'm the king. I just want to imagine, only compliments only, please. So I think that's one side of it. And then the trolling side, there's a type of person who is definitely very unhappy. Mm-hmm. And part of their unhappiness involves spitting out aggression and bile, and so they're two separate things. I deal with it by not looking at things. So I don't check my @messages on Twitter. I stopped a long time ago when I realised, like my friend Catherine Ryan, she's quite energised by it. She loves a discussion, she loves an insult,
And
she finds a lot of them funny.
And she has great comebacks.
Yeah, and that's it. And so a little bit like, do you remember when James Blunt was doing the same thing, kind of searching his own name and putting these hilarious slams? There are people who enjoy it as fun and they make it entertaining for other people, and that's brilliant. I realise I'm one of the people who I go kind of grey inside, and in my head all day I'm feeling sad or arguing with that person. Yeah. So instead I've just decided you don't have to look at it. I've got a website, and sometimes people email me through that, and more often than not, they're very kind of discursive. Even if they are, like, I read your book and I'm a midwife and this is something I disagree with, I then think, well, that's what happens when you write a book. How wonderful they've taken the time. Because it's very different. An email is much longer than a tweet. So rather than someone going, you're wrong about that, which sounds like, but I always make sure I'm in the right mood to read my website emails. And then there's this other option where someone said to me, you can get someone else to read them and delete the negative ones. And then I feel like, what, am I Kim Jong-un now? Where I can't deal with, you have to always allow, not everyone is going to love you.
No.
And I think it's a real privilege to have my job. And I think it is part of the tax on it is, if you're putting all of that stuff out there, you have to occasionally listen back. You can't kind of cover your ears.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Well, that I think is really good advice. I mean, I'm going to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
What else can we look forward to in this series?
In this series, the second episode is about jealousy. It's a lot more about my sister Cheryl there, because we're only 18 months apart. So when I was growing up, I realise now that's what those negative feelings were.
Who's older?
I'm the eldest.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm a horrible big sister. We all get on very well now, but didn't for a very long time. I shared a bedroom with Cheryl until I was 18. So basically my entire life, from when she was born till I moved out at 18. And so it's just, we were too close. And we didn't ever have anything that was ours separately. And so lots of fighting. And people think girls aren't violent.
Oh, that's not true.
But we really are.
Oh, my God.
And Cheryl and I were. And I think it was only in our late teens that we stopped having punch-ups.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know about the too close. My sister's 6 years older than me.
Oh, yeah.
And I had to share a room with her, and it was brutal.
Yeah.
I mean, she was brutal.
Yeah, and it's cruelty, isn't it? I mean, you realise I guess it is because you don't have proper empathy yet. Like, you are just kind of fighting for survival. So, jealousy is the second episode. Then the next one's territory, which again is a lot about sharing a room with Cheryl. And also in the territory episode, I really wanted to discuss things like Israel-Palestine, or current things that are going on. I mean, I didn't. It ended up being 2 lines. I wanted to talk about the refugee situation, the fact that even though we consider ourselves very evolved, we're still behaving like chimpanzees in terms of, although we've never been chimpanzee, we're behaving like apes in terms of this is mine and I was born here and you're coming in. I tried to kind of touch on that a bit. I think it's a very, very serious topic, but I tried to kind of explore it a little bit. And then the last episode is about altruism and charity, because I wanted to end on a positive, and also because going alongside all of these negative things, murder, jealousy, being territorial, the other side is that a human being is a balance. In each situation, sometimes it's a huge benefit for us to work together.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes we have to defend what we think that we've got. And that's actually the kind of contradiction of a human being. We are always assessing, do we work together or do I fight you?
But it's a comedy.
Yes,
right? Yeah, the show's a comedy.
No, this is what exactly what my producer kept saying when I was kind of they very kindly gave me some writing time at the BBC, and every time they walked in, I was on Facebook, and it was really embarrassing. But I did get work done as well, and every time I would say, I think I just want to say this thing about how Australia, which is a place where we sent our convicts, has all these refugees just like outside treated in this horrific way, and they're like, and where's the joke? And I was like, I'll do it in an Australian accent. That's a stupid voice. I'll do it that way. So, yeah, some of it you'll hear is it's my problem as a comic, actually, is that I can be too earnest, and then you have to go, If you don't have a punchline, you can't say it.
You can't say
you
that.
Can't say it.
No, but that's why you're like my friend.
Yeah.
You know, you say things and then and then we think about them.
Yeah.
And they stay with us.
Yes.
So now tell me a little bit about other projects or touring. What else? 2018, what's it looking like?
2018, it's looking pretty great. I start a tour in September, so up till Christmas, so that will be really good. And I'm finishing my second book at the moment, so most of my time is researching and doing that. And I've got a short for the BBC of my original book.
Oh,
So
Animal.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, and what's the tour called?
It's called Lads, Lads, Lads.
Oh, Lads, Lads,
Yeah.
Lads. Wonderful. So you're busy.
Yeah, really busy.
You're busy. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure.
It has been a pleasure for me. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
being here. That's it for this edition of Comedy of the Week. You're now free to go and listen to the rest of Sara Pascoe, the Modern Monkey. But while you're doing that, take a moment and get in touch with me. Just use hashtag Comedy of the Week and let me know how much you're loving this podcast. Or, you know what? Just tell me what you think of bonobo peace tactics. See you next time. And remember, stay warm, but be cool. Oh, and one more thing. You know the school friend I spoke about earlier? She's still my best friend, even though for over a decade, we've lived more than 6,000 miles away from each other.
Hello, I'm Mae Martin from Grown Up Land, the podcast where each week Bisha K. Ali and Ned Sedgwick and I untangle the adult world's most complex issues with the help of programs that you can hear on BBC Radio 4. Yeah, we only really deal with the big stuff. How close do we have to be for you to get a friendship tattoo with me? I could do it for you.
Oh, really?
I've done it with a needle and a Bic pen.
Wait, a needle and a bit... Were you in prison?
No, I was at a dinner party and things got out of
What?
hand.
I mean, that is an out-of-hand dinner. When a dinner party gets out of hand for me, we crack into their parents' port. Like, we don't...
That's Grown Up Land, and you can find it wherever you found this.